As Colleen said, my name is Eddie Hartmann. I will be leading us today through an adventure through the box we call Cliente, which is a simple introduction to enumerating a target, finding an SMB service that might be vulnerable, inspecting it with a couple simple tools, and then getting all the way through to compromise and taking it over as a root user. So it's going to be fun. For those of you that have never seen it, it should be a great introduction to a couple tools, some enumeration techniques that you can jot down as reliable, things that you can repeat in say another environment. If you've seen it before, it might be just another example, another tool you haven't seen, or a way that you can do something you might not have considered. So I hope you enjoy. As Colleen said, if you're in the process of registering last minute here, we have a couple of minutes where I'm going to walk through just a little bit about what SMB is and what you can expect today. And then we'll go ahead and get started. So if you'll permit me, we'll see if I can get this PowerPoint here to start. I only have a little bit. There we go. Beautiful. First try. That's always a good sign. So as we mentioned, we're here today to talk about the Cliente box, hacking SMB. My name is Eddie Hartmann. I'm a 32-year-old Chicago native, 12 years in the culinary industry before I graduated from the September 2020 remote bootcamp here at Evolve. And as a curriculum developer, I basically help maintain and develop the curriculum here at Evolve, as well as engaging with a lot of the students across a lot of the boot camps. Of course, somebody wants to ring my buzzer as soon as I started Meetup here. Apologize about that. So I see a lot of former alumni in the chat here, so looking forward to hanging out with you all again. And yeah, so the reality is that I did come from a culinary background, and there's proof there. So if you're new to the industry in general, you too can do this, I promise. Our agenda for today is we're going to spend some time accessing and launching the instances we have for you. If you're just joining us, please make sure you go ahead and check that those are started now. We'll talk a little bit about SMB, and then we'll get right on to the hacking portion. So last chance, if you haven't registered and added the course yet, head to cyberlab.evolvesecurity.com and go ahead and get that started. So that's me at, I think, 24, standing in front of our wonderful selection of beers at Hopscotch in Franklin Park, Illinois. No longer there, but it was a blast. So SMB, what is that? If you've never heard of this before, it is an acronym first for server message block. Essentially, it's a protocol that allows users and other systems and services to read and write over a local network. Basically, you can imagine the directories on your computer. They might be available to you, but existing somewhere remotely on a different PC. And the SMB protocol is what enables the computers to do that. There's a whole lot of different maybe applications you might use that will rely on that protocol, but it's what's underlying. It's the engine behind the scenes that's making that process work. So it's a protocol, not an application, more of what you might call an agreement on how to communicate amongst various systems. So it was invented by IBM in the mid-'80s, and people typically associate it with Microsoft. Very, very popular as a file share mechanism there, but also very popular in Linux and Mac systems. Today, Samba is a actual Linux implementation of the SMB protocol. So that's what we're going to look forward to dealing with. The thing about SMB, and we have any network administrators in the room, you're more than welcome to disagree or agree, but it has a bit of a troubled past. Who knows if it's by design or just that it got picked on unfairly, but it's known to be difficult to secure. It's open by design. It shares files, to be frank. So that's pretty much what it comes down to. It's got to be able to access things. The implementation can be complex. And there's been a lot of bugs. We're on V3 currently, and V1 didn't have encryption. V2 got hit with a lot of bugs itself, and V3 just has some persistent problems that seem to be unable to deal with, right? So you might have heard of the Eternal Blue exploit, the alleged, nobody's really going to admit it, NSA exploit that the shadow brokers released. 2017 was a big year. WannaCry and NotPetya together did a whole lot of damage to the network infrastructure. So that was all built on an SMB exploit. And this year, the cybersecurity agencies, CISA, they raised their alert. SMB's back on the target range. Actually recall one of our alumni, who might even be on the call here, did a honeypot, and SMB was the most popular attack they found. So it's in the wild, and it's vulnerable, and it's important that attackers and defenders alike understand what they're dealing with. So, and just, as I said, it gets worse. A couple of CVEs that are plaguing V3. V1 has no encryption, and as we said, V2 has a lot of issues behind it. So top that off with upgrades being notoriously difficult. You have a recipe for a difficult service to maintain. So we're gonna have fun with that today. So what to expect from hacking Samba? To boil it down without getting too deep into the, your favorite methodology, your favorite acronym, right? The one we teach in our OSCP, the PTES, penetration testing execution standard. We'll call it enumerating the target machine, processing that information to identify something that we might be able to attack. We'll enumerate again, but a little bit closer. We'll get a foothold, and then we'll take that foothold all the way to the top with privilege escalation. We're going to keep it simple. The tools you could use all over the place, but we're gonna limit it to Nmap for the sake of mapping our target. We'll use enum for Linux and smbmap to sort of interact with our target. We'll throw a crack map exec in there because I know if our OSCP instructor is watching, it's his favorite tool. So that's something that you can use as well. We'll use smbclient to interact with our target, and we'll apply some patience, right? If you're doing this from a recording, might be a good time to stop a little bit here and there to see if you can guess what comes next. If you've never seen this before, patience is always helpful, right? When you're enumerating a target, you want to make sure you go through it slowly enough that you can process the information and identify what's actually valuable, right? So with that, I hope you had a chance to get everything started. Let's do some hacking. So if you have any issues getting this started, please message Tyler or Colleen. I'm going to go ahead and shift here to our lab screen so we can get going. Bear with me. Okay, so Tyler or Colleen, can you confirm you can see my Callie here?
Yep, you're good to go.
Beautiful. So if you've never seen it before, the environment we use in our all of our trainings is called CyberLAB. This is CyberLAB, where we have a in-browser Kali environment with our lab instructions here on the side for you to use. This is yours to play with, and we have a couple targets here in the upper right-hand corner. So once if you're starting with us for the first time, you'll probably start here at Welcome to the Meetup. You're going to want to head over to the hands-on lab, click on Cliente, and you'll be right at the start. So I can hide that with the little button in the arrows button. Go ahead and click on Start Lab. It'll likely drop you into the terminal here when you first start. So if you just click Settings and then Desktop, you'll have access to your own Kali desktop. Yours will start fresh more than likely. If you're working with this for the first time, when it comes to the sudo password that you'll probably need a couple times in this lab, you might want to write this down, but it's going to be a combination of the words CyberLAB and your first name backwards. The first name that we have for you is whatever shows up before Kali here. Mine is Evolve. So backwards, that is EV Love. I'm thinking of like electric vehicle love. So CyberLAB EV Love is going to be your password. So let's go ahead and elevate to root here. Just as an example, CyberLAB EV Love, and boom, I'm here. So as needed, that's CyberLAB, your first name backwards. So if you've forgotten at some point, please put it in chat. Somebody here, there's a lot of involved people, they'll remind you what it is. We've all been through this. So we've already talked a little bit about Samba, but we like to give a little bit of, or SMB, I should say. We'd like to give a little bit of context when we do every lab so that you can apply it to your environment in some capacity. Samba is an open source Linux Unix implementation of server message block. It's typically going to run on a Linux machine. It plays well with Active Directory so that you can bring Linux systems into that Active Directory environment that often people assume it can be only Microsoft. You're able to do that with clients like Samba. Just like other SMB services, it runs on port 139 and 445, typically 445 these days. And it's no different when it comes to the security track record that SMB has, because Samba is just a service or a client we're using that takes advantage of SMB. So the first thing that we want to do, and I'm not going to read out all these steps for everybody here. We're sort of going to walk through it. The steps are going to be our guide, but the first thing you want to do is make sure that you have target, right? I have my target. We're at 1050.149.119. So we'll go ahead and ping that 1050. Okay, And we've got it. So my target's alive, and I can go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to go ahead and nmap our target. So let's do a sudo nmap. We're going to do a -st for a connection scan. We're going to do a -sv to get some versions. We're going to be very verbose. And let's see, we're going to put it out as output in all the formats as Cliente. We're going to go ahead and give it our target. And 1050, 149, 119. We'll go ahead and fire it off. So immediately we can see, because I've got the verbosity on, I've got the expected ports. If we were coming into this blind, we wouldn't know necessarily that we're expecting SMB. You have the advantage of a peek into the environment ahead of time. But right here, we've got both of these ports are obviously running Samba. So we don't have a whole lot of information at the moment. We have some tangential information that this might be a Linux machine. We see we have a port 80 running Apache. So that's a hint there that might be Ubuntu. From here, we have a lot of options we can do with port 80. We could run things like dirb or dirbuster. We could run GoBuster. There's a lot of different directory. I don't think that's installed by default. There's a lot of different directory busting tools we can do. We can run Nicto to scan some web apps. We can load burp and try to interact with it. For the sake of time, there's nothing on that web app, but it's a good practice to certainly explore anytime that you see a port 80 open on the machine. We are going to limit that though to the 139. And I keep glancing off to my left here and seeing Chef Eddie pics. So if you must, I can maybe dig up one from when I was even younger. But that's only if we finish this lab on time. So this is a good starter scan. It's quick, tells us what's open. We want to do something a little bit more detailed, right? So if we could jump down to say step 7, let's see if we can find out a little bit more about the operating system on our machine here. So with nmap, we have a lot of options. In addition to the connection and versioning, I can go ahead and do tech O for operating system scan. This is going to give me a lot more information. People might be familiar with A, that is aggressive, does a lot of scanning at once. Personally, a fan of delivering only the results that I'm looking for, just out of habit, to make sure you don't do something that you shouldn't when that situation arises. So we'll do tech O, give it some more verbosity, and let's make sure we get the right IP, 1050, 149, 119. Okay, what I should have done there is actually specified the 2 ports I was looking for. It would have been a little bit faster, but we'll go ahead and see what happens, type of information we can get. Okay, so this will happen from time to time, right? Despite its best tries, we were unable to get an exact OS match. It gives us a lot of information, but I'm not going to go ahead and investigate this fingerprint and all this information. What I'm going to do instead is use some of the information at hand to see if I can get better results. So knowing that we see these ports open, if we do our homework, we can find out that what's likely running is SMB. So I can take advantage of some of the more advanced nmap scripts that I have available, and I can actually specifically search for the OS of that operating system. So, and I saw somebody over here, depending on where you're coming from, you might actually get an OS result. It'll come back as Linux 3.x. So this is an example of how nmap, it's a great tool, but you still want to, trust but verify. You want to get, when you're on the system, still double check, okay, was this an Ubuntu or was this a Windows system? So looking at my scan here, you can see that for whatever reason, I didn't get the OS detection show up as Linux. It tells me, hey, I couldn't give you any information, which is fine, right? We'll use some situational awareness to use a different scan. So in this case, we'll apply something specific called an OS discovery script. So you might be familiar with -sc, TAC-SC for running a script scan, safe script scan. That's great, but we can get a little bit more specific with a -- script, and then we'll name it specifically. So SMB OS discovery.nsc. We'll get version detection just for some additional information, and see what we get there. So this one should run off pretty quickly. There's something we can do while I'm waiting here. I've told myself I would do this. I will get that finished off pretty quickly. Instead of having to consistently type my IP address, as you see, we're probably all going to get tired with this. You can export that to a variable. There we go. Okay, so you can see we got a lot better information here. This script, SMB OS discovery, and I'll actually go ahead and put this in chat here if anybody wants to make sure they get the right thing on their side. Make sure you change my IP with your IP. You know what, we'll pause that because the copy paste here is a little bit weird. I'll go ahead and send out a command palette after this so that people can get access to all the commands that we ran on the system. But what this did is it specifically invoked this SMB discovery script. I highly recommend researching the power of Nmap. There's a lot of scripts in there that you can use that will give you really good, really granular information. So you can see that we not only got a little bit more information on here because of the version detection, but our SMB service tells us that this is Samba running on Ubuntu. This Windows output here is a little bit misleading, but we can be relatively certain that because it says Samba and we have the specific Ubuntu version, that that's what we're running. We've also got a computer name, Tech Giant, from this scan. So the NetBIOS computer name here, Tech Giant. Thank you so much, Dan, for putting that in there. Fully qualified domain name, a whole lot of information. So this is going to be useful later as we attempt to interact with this system, see what type of shares we got available. So if you're on step 7, the answer here, that is going to be Tech Giant, lowercase. So now that we know we're dealing with SMB 100%, we can bring in some tools here to play with. So Enum for Linux is the first one we're going to play with. It comes pre-installed on all of our ESA instances, so you shouldn't have to install anything else. And this is really helpful for a variety of reasons, right? Some of my favorite ones are these capitals up here. Getting things like password policy. If you're going to attempt to brute force, it would be really helpful to know what the minimum length is. For example, they say minimum length is 20. You might want to revisit your course of action, right? You can get some really good information on the groups and members. Down here, you can even enumerate some of the users via something called RID cycling that just sort of runs through possibilities and returns values for you. So we're going to go ahead and run a couple of these to see what type of information we can get. This would be that second step of enumeration, right? We've found the SMB service. Now we want to enumerate a little bit closer with something more specific to see what type of information we can gather when we look a little more closely. So if I bring in Enum for Linux, in here, we'll go ahead and close that. Let's bring the tech R flag first to see what we can get from that. And if you didn't catch what just happened, that $ box, that brought in my little variable earlier, so I don't have to type that IP every single time. So going through, there's a lot of information. It's almost a game of finding what you don't need to look for as much as it is seeing what is there, right? So what I see is all these unknowns and then boom, a couple of users, right? So I know I got root, that's obvious. Right here, I see Jujar. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I also see Josephine. So these are two that I can reliably assume are non-standard users on this system. I can tell you that we can look a lot closer, but those are the only two that we're going to be interested in, though. But you can see I've got a lot of built-in users that confirm that these existed, and we end up done here. So if I'm taking notes, I can note down that Josephine, she's a user, and Jujar, they're a user as well. So Enum for Linux has a lot more useful tools. So let's try the capital P, for example. Instead of R, we'll do tech P capital. This is going to go ahead and give us password policy information. So the output's a lot shorter, but certainly no less valuable, right? So if we scroll down to the password policy information portion here, we can see that the minimum password length is 5. If you're auditing a system, that might be something that you would bring up quickly. Hey, that's a really easily guessable password these days. You might want to increase that. Other things like password history length, all of this would be excellent use if you're going into some sort of brute force attack. Password guessing, very, very helpful. And I was able to get this information wholly unauthenticated. I'm just querying it to say, hey, can you respond with some information for me? So from here, something I might want to look at, just to prove that we can trust but verify all of this information here is our OS detection. Again, if we were still unsure because we had that Windows return there, we can see that this is a Samba running on Ubuntu service down here. So we can go away happy. Okay, this is a Linux machine. Another one that I wanted to bring up was one of the other capital flags here. If we can go ahead and just bring up the help again, we can talk about this one. It's the -U. So this one's our user list. I want to see if I can get some detailed information on our users. The little underscore -D here, this gives me a little bit more detail. So I'm going to combine both of those to make something a little bit more robust and hopefully return some helpful information as well as the answer to the next question here. So if you're new to using these tools, this is part of the game, right? You need to begin practicing with something, use it in various scenarios, and try out the flags to see what type of information you get. Without knowing what's available, it's kind of hard to understand what you could even get in response, right? So questions like the one we're going to answer next, so they can sometimes be a game of cat and mouse because it's just a measure of, are you doing your homework, right? So this uppercase U, lowercase d, pardon my typo. So here we go. We have a lot more user information now. So again, going back to our brute force, we can see that accounts are not going to be disabled. Account is not locked out. We have information on how that can happen for our brute force attack. Information on each one of these profiles is going to be here, as well as, again, a confirmation of the users we're going to be looking for. So again, we can see the home drive. We have Tech Giant. We can confirm that that is accessible on our system here. If we're looking at maybe manipulating some shares, we can get an additional information if we look closely here. But we are personally interested in shares, so we're going to go ahead and skip ahead a little bit to enumerating that portion of the system. If you're on step 9, enter is going to be -P to get password policy information from the system, and that's lowercase there. So if we want to really get down into how we can compromise the system, we're going to look for vulnerable share drives. -S capital is a good way to start, and we can see right here we have a couple at the very bottom. Under the share enumeration tab, I've got share name, type, and a comment. So this print here, this is commonly going to be used for printer drivers. Other print services are going to rely on this one. The IPC, this one we're just sort of going to ignore for now. Josephine is what we're interested in. So this looks to me immediately like, number one, it's non-standard. Its type tells me that it is a shared drive. And that comment is also certainly non-standard and is kind of funny. I guess in our world, door sounds like backdoor. So if you're going to tempt me, I'll certainly investigate the share there. So what I like to take note of here is, just because we know it exists doesn't mean we're able to interact with it yet. So we still need to get to that stage where, how can we maybe see if we can get on this share? If you're familiar with things like mount, that's certainly potential. You can try and mount that share onto your own service. In this situation, we're actually going to try to get onto that share for full compromise of that PC. So Enum for Linux is a good tool. A couple other ones we can use are SMB map. This one's along the same lines, but simple, a little bit simpler, I might say. You can see the output here is very easy to understand. SMB map. Let's go after box. We can get similar access, but what I like here is that we also get information on the permissions. So SMB map is able to tell me that I have read-only permissions to that box there. If we want to bring one more in here, we'll bring in crackmap exec. This is, as I said, one of our OSCP teachers' favorite tools. Pardon me there. So we'll do crackmap exec, SMB. So you need to name a protocol, give it a target. And in this case, I'm telling it to take a look at shares, and I'm going to give it just a blank username and a blank password. So it goes ahead and is able to just enumerate that and see what I can get. So let's see. Crackmap exec is a fascinating tool. It frankly deserves some study in its own right. It is able to create a database of information on your targets. So there's I think it's CME-DB. It is very intelligent. So as you're building a case on a target, you're able to call on information that you gained prior. So if you use it to enumerate, you can then use crackmap exec to potentially brute force access based on users you enumerated earlier. So it's a very intelligent tool. The learning curve can be a little bit higher, sort of just because of the potential for it. So in here, we're using somewhat of a simpler tool and a simpler method, but I highly suggest if you've never seen that, check out that tool. We won't do it now, but again, you can see that our permissions here, we have read, our remark instead of our comment, basic information, but again, this is just touching the surface here of what Graph Map exec can do. And it is a mouthful, trying to say that over and over and over again. So if you remember previously, we commented that the minimum password length required by the system was 5, based on the flag lowercase p. The RID for root, that answer came when we used the UD flag. So we'll just run that one again, because I skipped ahead of the process a little bit here. So at the very top of this output, or I should say a little bit lower than the top on this users box, we do see some information on these 3 users and the RID here. That's what we're looking for. So for root, we have 0x3e9. There we go. Correct. So we already covered how to use SMBmap, but in case you forgot the comment there, the answer we're looking for is door. SMBmap and Enum for Linux are 2 great tools. Really comes down to preference, right? So use both, research both, see which one works best for you. smbclient is actually the piece of the puzzle that we're going to use to start our connection. So I wanted to pause for a moment. So far, we have identified a target on our network with identifying its connectivity and enumerating its available services with Nmap. We've identified an SMB service and looked a little bit closer with a specific Nmap script to make sure what we were looking at was an SMB service. We're enumerating even closer now with SMB specific tools to see what type of information we can get on the target's environment, the work groups, the users, all available information that we would have access to. You could imagine that on an enterprise environment, we'd have more than 2 users on this system. We'd also hope for better security, but you could be surprised. At this point, we're actually going to start taking some more direct action and start seeing if we can get on one of these shares here. So I know that I have Josephine as a user and I see Josephine as a share. My assumption at this point, at least my hope, is that I'm going to be able to access Josephine's PC via her share. And from there, hopefully I can take some other actions. So moving on, smbclient, this personally took me a while when I was learning this for the first time to understand. Looking back on it, it feels rather simple. But if we pull up the man page here, it gives it a pretty concise description. It's part of the Samba suite itself. So it's designed to be used with the Samba service that we're using. It's a client that can talk to an SMB/CIFS server. For the sake of people that are curious, that CIFS, they can be seen as one and the same as SMB. And this service name option that we have, if you see up here in our command, this is the name of the service you want to use on the remote server. So essentially, you develop a command with the server and the service and hope for a connection. There is an enormous amount of different options you have, like almost any Linux command, but at its most basic, we simply need to say smbclient. We're going to go the server being our box, the IP address of your client machine, and we're going to go for Josephine. Great, so it's asking me for a password. So I'm going to pause for a second to give you maybe 10, 15 seconds to come up with this on your own. We've already gotten to the password. It was publicly available to us. It's an example of really poor security, but it's also hopefully something that you wouldn't necessarily see in your environment. It's a great test of lateral thinking. So the only out of place additional information that I've seen was that comment for Josephine, door. So if we go ahead and try the password DOOR, it really was that simple. So I hate to break it to you, no convoluted remote code execution here, just really simple password implementations, right? So if you've never worked with SMB, it works a lot like FTP. So immediately on my target, I can ls and see that I've got flag number 1 and a message from the other user. So if you've never used FTP again, you can simply type get and then the file you're looking for with tab complete still works, hit enter, and it'll pull it onto your host PC. So I can go ahead and get both of, oops, that was the same thing again. I can go ahead and get both of these, exit off my system and go back. I may have spent the time, if this was a more difficult exploit, to set up persistence, maybe put an SSH key on the back there, but this was simple enough that we're just going to go ahead and move on to the next step, right? So I've got 2 files. I've got flag 1 and I've got a message. So first, I'm going to start with flag 1. I know this, but this is a base 64 encoded message. We've never seen encoding before. This is often a tool used just in legitimate use cases to take information and transform it into another format. If you've done this before, very common in CTFs, flags or hints or codes, they'll be encoded in a way that it's not easily available. So there's a really nifty tool built into Kali Linux called base 64 that you can use the decode flag with to go ahead and translate that into something that we can read. So here we are. This is what we call user compromise of this box here. We've got our flag. Welcome to the tech giant world. Our username is Josephine, and we've got a password door plus open. So this is a great clue. I have a new password and a user. Even though I just compromised their box over SMB, it looks like I might be able to take this further. So in the lab, if you're following along on recording or right now, you'll notice this is where we stop. We're going to go ahead and take it the next step further and do some local privilege escalation with the remaining time that we have here. Bringing a tool called LinPs. It's a lot of fun. You can spend an hour looking at a single output from LinPs. We're going to get right to the meat of it just so you can see where we can dial into valuable information. But if you've been following along thus far, that was user compromise, and we've got our flag. So if you want to go ahead and answer all these questions, you'd enter your flag in here and we can move on. So I don't see any questions. Don't see any thing, Colleen or Tyler, is there any questions, anything that we had that we needed to answer before we move on to the next step?
I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this out into a full screen here, make it a little bit easier on everybody. So just to kind of walk back through the history of what we did here. It wasn't all that complicated. We knew what we were looking for. You can take advantage of that. But we'll go ahead and paste some of these commands in here for you. So the first command that we ran, just a big old nmap, get some information on the target. We did a connection scan because I wanted to make sure that we had a full 3-way handshake with targets, get some good information. And I like verbosity, so VVV. And in case I wanted it again, went ahead and output that into a bunch of different formats. And if you've ever done this before, you've also typed ls into the Zoom chat. You can see that that nmap output all this information, so I can go ahead and use it later. Cliente dot, let's see, gnmap for greppable. It's a lot of information, but this is information on this host, what's up, what's down. You can see that these two pieces of information here give me all that information. So from that nmap, we identified that we had some more detailed information available on 139 and 445. So we ran an SMB specific script on the target. I'm going to paste in a little addition of port 139 and 445, just so that you know that that would have been a more specific way of accessing the target. The next thing we did was we ran a series of enum for Linux commands. I'm going to go ahead and paste all of these in there at once. These were for the sake of getting more information, seeing what type of information we get on the users, the shares, the environment. We went ahead and used SMB map as well as crack map exec. Then finally, the one that you're probably looking for is how do we actually get on the box? We use smbclient, targeted our server, and then use the user Josephine with the password door. So if you're in the chat, that was the entire path to user right there. There's a lot of other things you could have done, as we said, exploiting port 80, taking a look at other information on the environment. But this was, as you can see, pretty easy to get to the user there. So the next step is going to involve the hint we got. So if we recall, if we take a look at our flag there, we had the password door plus open. I also want to take a look at that message. Someone's very sorry, but they lost their password and they're hoping that we can reset it. So let's hope we can too, right? So I'm going to go ahead and assume that that password was for Josephine. So let's take a stab. Josephine at my target. We'll trust that key and try door plus open. What do you need to know? Here we are. So I'm Josephine on the host tech giant. So not only do I have access via SMB, but I have access directly onto the host here. So looking around and orienting myself, you can see that I already put linps on this host machine. We'll go ahead and do that again so we can all benefit from it. This delete it later folder, if I go ahead and change in there, we can see that that is actually the offending folder that has the information on it. So this was the easy exposed share. Security admins need to go ahead and get that out of here. So the question is, what do I do as a low privileged user? There's not much I can do. Let's see, sudo tech L, let's try door plus open. I may not run sudo on tech giant. So I'm pretty limited. The most I can do is look around, see what's on my system. I could run some other commands, specific, information gathering, like on the system. I can look for the system information. For the sake of this demonstration, we're going to jump right to using linps. So linps is what we might call a local privilege escalation tool. It's very, very valuable for just outputting a volume of information on the system you're on, interesting files, potential ways that you can elevate your privileges from local user to a privileged user. So go ahead and split this over here. What we're going to do is download it first onto our host and then onto this PC. This PC here does not have access to the outside internet. So we're going to have to use a common method using a Python server to pull it over. So if you allow me to just grab a command here, we can download linps directly from the GitHub website in one go using this command wget to pull it right down. And if I ls, you can see the boom right here, linps.sh. So for those of you that want that, it is in chat here. Wget is a useful tool. If you navigated to that link on your own, you'd see it's essentially a raw text file. We save it as linps.sh so that we can run it on our target machine. With little effort, we can do Python 3 server, hosted on port 8080.
Hey, Eddie, real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you post stuff in the chat, make sure it says to everyone.
Oh, really?
The panelists, yeah.
Well, thank you. There's a whole lot of stuff in there that I'm gonna have to repost then.
I've just kind of been putting stuff.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, perfect. I could type the password properly, that would help. Okay, so this PC here is now, this box, I should say, is now hosting that, all these files. So I can go ahead and grab the IP of that. It's 136.6. You can actually pull that file directly from your PC using the same command we did over here, treating it just like any server. So I can pull linps.sh and boom, we've got it locally. You run the command chmod +x to make sure that you can execute it. And it's simple as that. We've got linps running locally. So this cute little P here is going to give us a lot of information and a hand towards compromising the system. So we ran a little bit longer than I planned to, so we're not going to be able to spend as much time on linps as we probably should. But to keep it simple, this legend here will help you a lot. Red and yellow, 95% chance it's a privilege escalation vector. One of the things I want to drive home that this is really useful for is learning how to do privilege escalation on your own. Each one of these locations is somewhere that it is looking that may be a vector for you to be able to compromise the system. It's got a lot of useful information, such as the Linux version, and it'll tell you exactly how to get there with a link. This system is old, so it's vulnerable to a lot of CVEs, and you can see we've got one right here. It's got information on the user's path. We got environment variables, a Linux exploit suggester that was built directly in to give you, again, links and information on all the possible exploits. If you're familiar with Dirty Cow, you can see that's in there. The recent Pwn kit, that's in there too, because this box is a little bit older. So as you can see, spending some time on this is well worth it. What we're looking for is something called it's an SUID file. We're looking for something that is able to give us a result that allows us to elevate our privileges. In this case, it's something related to resetting that password for that user. So if we scroll down to something called interesting files that are writable by us and everyone else, we'll see that we have a curious file there. I don't want to miss it, so we're going to go slowly here. Maybe not, maybe too slowly. So this one's good to look at too, SUID. This is for easy privesk, exploits, and write permissions. These SUID, these are super user binaries. We could have a long conversation about that, but essentially, there's a website called GTFO bins. I'm certain someone can link that in the chat. Will help you out a lot for privesk, and it'll using information like this will help you when, hey, you know, can I use this as a privesk method? It'll give you direct code that'll help you elevate directly, you know, if it's possible. There you go. Appreciate it, everybody. Let's go. Backup files. Okay, here we are. Interesting files owned by me or writable by everyone. So it took me a while to find, and the reason is a ton of useful information. So it does take some learning curve to go through this and be able to parse it quickly, but I see an interesting .sh file. Linpeas did me the favor of highlighting it, but this would be something that I would look at immediately. Not only is it obviously not a standard Linux file, it's in the Tech Giant folder, JH. I don't have information, but I have a user, Josephine, so maybe that's hers, and it's shared. So I know I'm able to get access to this. So I'm going to go ahead and see what that does. So I no longer need that server anymore, so we'll go ahead and forget that. But user share JH Tech Giant is where I want to go. So CD. What do I got? I have a fully executable file. Can I go ahead and cat that file? Look at this. It's going to go ahead and change the password for me. So why is that possible? It looks like this file is runnable by somebody in my group, but it has full rewrite capacity over everything. So it looks like this is a big no-no. You wouldn't want something like this in the background, just an easy solution. So we go ahead and run this. If I forget .sh, user, and the new password. So we're almost there. If you've never changed users in Linux, I know when I was first starting using the operating system, it was one thing to even navigate it. It was another thing to think, how do I maybe, you know, change different users? The su command with L for login, I'm sorry, U for user, and then you just specify the user that you want. You can go ahead and see, I totally did that backwards. Somebody's gonna laugh at me in chat here. I was confused at myself. And then you provide the password. So it's L for login. You provide the password. In our case, it was JUJHAR plus 80. And here we are. So I've elevated one user. The thing is, what can this user do? So when we were first on Josephine, we ran sudo -L. We had no privileges. We'll do the same thing here. Give it the password again. In this case, we are on a fully privileged user. So at this point, we've got full compromise. So for the sake of it, see if we can get to root, and there we are. So in the case of compromising the user here, it was pretty straightforward again, but it was just a matter of looking very closely at the system that you're on, using the tools at your disposal to find weaknesses that they had. It could be just as simple as finding an exposed pseudo binary. For example, if Nano is able to write root files, you could add your own user. You could possibly change startup files. It's just a matter of looking closely. Again, in this case, we were able to find a executable that was easy to exploit that simply gave us a username and password. But you know, oftentimes it's simply a matter of finding the way in. The executable portion, you know, isn't nearly as difficult. So from here, we can navigate to our root folder. Typically, when you're looking for your final flags, you'll see them on the you know, in the root's home folder, and we've got it. So you can go ahead and save this for your records. I don't have anywhere for you to put it in the file. For those of you that want to come back, if you can't figure this out, you know, you can finish it with the first flag. But this is it. This box is done. There are other ways to get into this box. If you want to go ahead and explore other alternatives, please be my guest. There's certainly a lot of local privesk opportunities here. It is an older Ubuntu box, and there was plenty of CVEs, so you could have fun with things like Dirty Cow if you wanted to go ahead and play with this over the couple of weeks that it's available for you. But I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, you can feel free to email me. If you're on our Slack, please feel free to Slack me if you had some questions on how this went together. As always, we're here if you want to talk. But Colleen, that's it. If you want to go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eddie. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Okay, there we go.
Thank you everyone so much for coming. I've been working with Eddie for a while now, and he really is the best teacher. So I'm glad that everyone was able to come and learn from him and, you know, learn some new stuff. So it's super exciting. We are going to put this on our website this afternoon, and it will also be available via email. We'll include the notes that Eddie was sending in the chat so that if you want to go back and do the lab and keep working on it, we'll provide you with that information. Like I said, you will have CyberLAB available for the next week, so make sure to take advantage of that. Other than that, oh, we have our next meetup coming up at the end of June, June 28th, and that will be with our OSCP Bootcamp instructors. So make sure to look for more information for that as well. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to Eddie for taking the time to do this. And we hope all of you have a great rest of your day.